You're listening to Abstract AF and I'm Sneha Jaiswal. In this episode, we're going to talk about Sputnik Sweetheart, the novel by Haruki Murakami that came out in 1999. I'm going to try and explain the cryptic climax of the story. But first, let's quickly summarize the novel for those who haven't read it and don't intend to either, but would like to know what the book is about. So, the novel is narrated by a protagonist who's simply referred to as K. He is a 25-year-old teacher who is in love with Sumire, a girl who was his junior when they were studying literature. Kay reveals how Sumire dropped out of college to pursue her dream of becoming an author and considered Kay as her closest friend and confidant. As far as her own romantic life is concerned, the 22-year-old is said to have never been attracted to anybody all her life until she meets a charming older woman called Miu at a wedding. Now, not only is Miu 17 years older than Sumire, she's also married to a man. But as with anybody who is young and in love, Sumire is more than just happy to be in the same room as Miu. So when the older woman offers her a job to be her secretary, she takes up the opportunity without much thought. Drowning in these new feelings of love, Sumire constantly calls up Kay almost every night at unearthly hours, pouring her heart out and asking him all sorts of questions. Like, what's the difference between a sign and a symbol? And even though I've read an English translation of the work, Murakami's beautiful hold on the written language is evident from the narration. But overall, I wasn't very happy with the story, especially with the abrupt ending and the strange sequence of events that lead to it. Murakami infuses elements of magic realism into the story, which makes the plot widely open to the reader's interpretation. I'm not really a fan of magic realism. I love reading realistic novels and equally enjoy stuff with magic too, but when the two are mixed together, the outcome is rarely to my liking. So back to Sputnik Sweetheart. Sumire starts to work with Miu, whose wine business requires a lot of travel. So the two travel around the world and spend some idyllic days on a Greek island. It's here that the title Sputnik Sweetheart becomes relevant because the Russian word Sputnik means traveling companion. And that's what Sumire and Miu become, even though Sumire wants more. During their stay at the Greek island, Sumire finally confesses her love for Miu one night and realizes her feelings will never be reciprocated in the same way. Next day in the morning, Miu finds out that Sumire has disappeared. When a few days of search doesn't yield anything, Miu calls up Kei and asks him to leave Japan and fly to Greece as soon as he can. They, however, aren't able to trace Sumire, even with the police involved. It's here that we first see elements of magic realism. In a flashback, it's revealed how Miu had an out of body experience when she was younger. She was trapped in a Ferris wheel for an entire night, and from there she spies on her apartment with a pair of binoculars, and to her shock, she sees herself in her room with another man. She wakes up in a hospital the next day, completely bruised, and the authorities tell her that they found her in the Ferris wheel. Readers are led to believe that Mew split into two personalities that night, and that parallel worlds exist in the universe. So when Sumire disappears without a trace from the tiny Greek island, Kay makes a hypothesis that she somehow managed to transport herself into a parallel world, one where she could maybe have a happier ending with Mew. Kei goes back to Japan and his teaching life, still hoping that Sumire might come back to their world someday. And that brings me to the cryptic ending. Weeks after Sumire's disappearance, Kei gets a call from her. She claims that she's back in Japan, calling from the usual telephone booth she used. She asks Kei to come and get her. The call ends, and we're on the last page. So let's go over the closing paragraphs.
Suddenly, the phone cuts off. Still clutching the receiver, I stare at it for a long time. Like the phone itself is some vital message, its very shape and color containing hidden meaning. Reconsidering, I hang up. I sit up in bed and wait for the phone to ring again. I lean back against the wall, my focus fixed on a single point in space before me, and I breathe slowly, soundlessly, making sure of the joints bridging one moment of time and the next. The phone doesn't ring. An unconditional silence hangs in the air. But I'm in no hurry. There's no need to rush. I'm ready. I can go anywhere. Right? Right, you are. I get up out of bed. I pull back the old faded curtain and open the window. I stick my head out and look up at the sky. Sure enough, a moldy colored half moon hangs in the sky. Good. We are both looking at the same moon, in the same world. We are connected to reality by the same line. All I have to do is quietly draw it towards me. I spread my fingers apart and stare at the palms of both hands, looking for blood stains. There aren't any. No scent of blood, no stiffness. The blood must have already, in its own silent way, seeped inside.
And that's how it ends. The easiest conclusion to make of the ending is that Sumire has in fact resurfaced again. But well, that probably is too simple an explanation. So let's first consider a realistic explanation. Kay gets the call from Sumire while he was still dreaming. He tells readers how he often dreamt about waiting for Sumire's call at 3 a.m., but the phone almost never rings. But finally, in one variation of his dream, the phone does ring, and Sumire is back in his life like before. So the ending, I think, is only a retelling of a dream. Because if it was real, Kay would have rushed to fetch Sumire. But remember, he says he has all the time in the world and that he can now go anywhere. Well, that's because he's dreaming and anything is possible in your dreams. Now let's look at another explanation taking into view the magic realism element of parallel worlds. Earlier in the novel, Kay finds some of Sumire's writings, where she writes about how if Mew does not accept her, she will try to cross the bridge when it comes, but it's implied that she is referring perhaps to crossing over to a different world, because she says that blood must be drawn to cross over. Which is why, in the end, Kay looks at his hand for blood, implying that he tried to cut his palm to draw blood in an attempt to cross over to the other side to be with Sumire. He doesn't notice any blood because his wounds have probably healed in this parallel universe. And everything is perfect here because even the girl he loves is back in his life. There's also the possibility of a darker meaning to the ending, that the lonely and depressed Kay tried to kill himself and was successful in the attempt. So in the end, he's talking to us from the afterlife, where he's back to speaking with Sumire, because those 3 a.m. calls with her were the best moments in his life. So what happened to Sumire in this scenario? The most realistic explanation is that she died by drowning in the sea when she was in that Greek island. So we have a tragic end to the lives of two people who were doomed with unrequited love. And those are some different ways in which the ending of Sputnik Sweetheart can be explained. That's all for this episode. Talk to you in the next one.